The dining room was a battlefield, and Ethan Caldwell was bleeding. His father's voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the Thanksgiving chatter. "You're filthy, Ethan. A disgrace to this family." The words landed like a grenade, silencing the clinking of forks and the hum of small talk, leaving only the suffocating weight of shame in their wake. Ethan, 25, with a mop of dark hair and eyes like green fire, sat frozen at the table in his parents' sprawling Connecticut home. His cousins, aunts, and uncles stared, some with pity, others with disgust, as his father, Richard Caldwell, a man of iron will and old money, loomed over him. Ethan's crime. He dared to bring his boyfriend, Lucas Harper, to the family's sacred holiday dinner. Lucas, with his warm chestnut curls and disarming smile, sat beside Ethan, his hand trembling under the table where it gripped Ethan's tightly. "I raised you better than this," Richard spat, his face red with fury. "You think you can parade your lifestyle in my house? Get out. Both of you." Ethan's mother, Claire, sat silently, her eyes fixed on her untouched plate. His younger sister, Mia, 16 and fierce, opened her mouth to protest, but a glare from their father silenced her. The room spun as Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Lucas rose too, his jaw tight, but his gaze steady, a quiet strength Ethan clung to like a lifeline. Without a word, they left, the front door slamming shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot in Ethan's heart. The drive back to New York City was a blur of rain and silence. Ethan gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Honda, his knuckles white, while Lucas stared out the window, the city lights streaking across his face. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. I thought they'd at least try to understand." Lucas turned, his hazel eyes soft but resolute. "You don't apologize for who you are, Ethan. Not to them. Not to anyone." He reached over, his hand warm on Ethan's thigh. "We'll figure this out. Together." Their apartment in Brooklyn was small, but there's a sanctuary of mismatched furniture, secondhand books, and Polaroids pinned to the fridge. Ethan, a graphic designer with dreams bigger than his paycheck, had moved there 2 years ago after college. Lucas, a barista and aspiring musician, had joined him 6 months later, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that didn't always understand. They'd met at a dive bar in the East Village, where Lucas's acoustic set had left Ethan speechless, not just from the music, but from the way Lucas's eyes found his in the crowd, like they were the only 2 people in the room. That night, as rain battered the windows, Ethan curled into Lucas on their lumpy couch, the sting of his father's words still raw. "What if they never come around?" he murmured, his voice muffled against Lucas's chest. "Then we build our own family," Lucas said, his fingers tracing circles on Ethan's back. "One that loves us for who we are." The next morning, Ethan woke to a text from Mia. "I'm so sorry. Dad's wrong. I love you." It was a flicker of hope, but it couldn't erase the ache. Ethan threw himself into work, taking on freelance projects to distract from the void his family left. Lucas, ever the optimist, filled their apartment with music, his guitar strumming late into the night, each note a reminder that they were enough for each other. But the world outside their bubble wasn't always kind. Ethan's design portfolio was gaining traction, and he landed a gig with a progressive ad agency in Manhattan. The catch: they wanted him to pitch a campaign celebrating queer love for a national pride event. It was a dream opportunity, but it meant baring his soul to strangers when his own family had rejected him. Lucas, sensing his hesitation, sat him down one evening over takeout pizza. You're scared, Lucas said, not accusingly, but with that gentle clarity that always disarmed Ethan. But this is your chance to tell your story. Our story. Show the world what love looks like. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. What if I mess it up? What if it's not enough? Lucas leaned in, kissing him softly. It's already enough because it's you. The pitch consumed Ethan's days. He poured his heart into it, designing visuals that captured the raw, beautiful chaos of love. Two men holding hands in a crowded subway, a lesbian couple laughing in a park, a trans person standing tall under a rainbow flag. Each image was a piece of himself, a defiance of his father's words. Lucas helped, brainstorming taglines and humming melodies that inspired Ethan's work. They stayed up late, laughing over coffee, crying over memories, and dreaming of a future where they could be unapologetically themselves. Weeks turned into months, and the wound from Thanksgiving festered. Ethan threw himself into the ad campaign, his designs becoming bolder, more unapologetic. The agency loved his work, and whispers of a potential award began to circulate. But at night, when the city quieted, Ethan's thoughts drifted to his family. Mia's texts were frequent, full of teenage defiance and love, but his parents were a void. No calls, no apologies, just silence. Lucas, meanwhile, was chasing his own dreams. His band, The Drift, landed a gig at a popular Brooklyn venue, a step toward the music career he'd always wanted. Ethan was his biggest fan, sitting front row at every show, cheering as Lucas's voice filled the room. But the gigs barely paid, and their savings were dwindling. Ethan's freelance checks helped, but New York was relentless, and the pressure was mounting. One frigid January evening, Ethan came home to find Lucas pacing their apartment, his guitar untouched. The venue canceled our next show, Lucas said, his voice tight. They booked some big name instead. We're out. Ethan pulled him into a hug, feeling the tension in Lucas's shoulders. You'll get another shot. You're too good not to. Lucas managed a small smile. You always believe in me, don't you? Always, Ethan said, kissing his forehead. We're in this together. Remember? The next day, Ethan got a call from the agency. His campaign had been shortlisted for a national advertising award, and they wanted him to present it at a gala in Manhattan. It was a chance to shine, but the thought of standing in a room full of strangers, defending his vision of queer love, made his stomach churn. What if they saw him the way his father did? Filthy. Wrong. Lucas sensed his fear and dragged him to their favorite diner, a 24-hour spot with greasy burgers and neon signs. Over milkshakes, he leaned across the table, his eyes fierce. You're not just doing this for you, Ethan. You're doing it for every kid out there who's been told they're not enough. You're showing them they're worth celebrating. Ethan's heart swelled. Lucas always knew how to pull him back from the edge. What would I do without you? He asked, half laughing, half serious. Starve. Probably, Lucas teased, stealing a fry from Ethan's plate. The gala was a whirlwind of glitz and nerves. Ethan, in a borrowed suit, stood on a stage under blinding lights, presenting his campaign to a sea of industry giants. His voice shook at first, but as he spoke about love raw, real, and resilient, found his strength. The audience applauded, some wiping tears, and Ethan felt a spark of hope. Maybe he could change minds, even if his father's was out of reach. Backstage, Lucas was waiting, his grin wide enough to light the room. You were incredible, he said, pulling Ethan into a kiss that tasted like victory. For a moment, The world felt right. But the high didn't last. A week later, Ethan's phone buzzed with a voicemail from his mother. Her voice was strained, unfamiliar. "Ethan, we need to talk. It's important. Please call me." He played it again, then again, his heart racing. Lucas, sitting on their couch, raised an eyebrow. "What's that about?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, his fingers hovering over the call button. "But it doesn't sound good." He dialed, and Claire's voice was softer than he remembered. "Your father's sick, Ethan. Cancer. It's bad." The words hit like a punch, stealing his breath. "He's asking for you." Ethan's mind reeled. The man who'd called him filthy, who'd banished him from the family, was now asking for him. Anger and guilt tangled in his chest. "What does he want?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp. "He's scared," Claire said quietly. "And he's sorry." Ethan hung up, his hands shaking. Lucas pulled him close, not saying a word, just holding him as the rain started again outside. Ethan didn't know what to feel: rage, grief, or something softer, something he wasn't ready to name. Ethan didn't call back. Not that day, or the next. The voicemail sat like a stone in his pocket, heavy with questions he wasn't ready to answer. Why now? What did sorry mean from a man who'd never apologized in his life? Lucas didn't push, but his quiet presence was a reminder that Ethan didn't have to face this alone. Work became Ethan's escape. The ad campaign was gaining national attention, with blogs and ex-posts calling it revolutionary and heart-wrenching. Ethan scrolled through the comments, his chest tight with pride and fear. Some praised his courage. Others hurled slurs that echoed his father's words. Lucas, ever protective, would snatch the phone away, muttering, "Don't let the haters rent space in your head." But the haters weren't just online. One night, as Ethan and Lucas walked home from a late dinner, a group of guys outside a bar started shouting, "Faggots." One yelled, his voice slurred with liquor. Ethan froze, his heart pounding, but Lucas stepped forward, his jaw set. "Keep walking," he told them, his voice low but firm. The guys laughed but backed off, and Ethan clung to Lucas's hand, his pulse racing. "You okay?" Lucas asked later, as they sat on their fire escape, the city sprawling below. "No," Ethan admitted, his voice small. "I'm tired of feeling like I have to fight for this. For us." Lucas wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. "You don't have to fight alone. I've got your back. Always." The next day, Mia showed up at their apartment unannounced, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes red from crying. "Dad's getting worse," she said, her voice trembling as she stood in their cramped living room. "He's in the hospital now. Mom's a mess. And I didn't know where else to go." Ethan hugged her tightly, his little sister's pain cutting deeper than his own. "You're always welcome here, Mia," he said, his voice thick. Lucas made tea, his calm presence steadying them both, and they sat on the couch, Mia spilling the story of their father's diagnosis: lung cancer. Aggressive, with months, maybe weeks, left. "He keeps asking for you," Mia said, twisting a strand of her dark hair. "He won't say it outright, but I think he regrets what he said. He's just too stubborn to admit it." Ethan's throat tightened. "I don't know if I can face him," he confessed. "Not after everything." Mia's eyes, so like his own, searched his face. "You don't owe him anything, E. But what if you regret not going?" That night, Ethan lay awake, Lucas's steady breathing beside him. The idea of seeing his father again felt like walking into a lion's den. But Mia's words echoed, and by morning, he'd made a decision. "I'm going to Connecticut," he told Lucas over coffee. "Not for him. For me." Lucas nodded, his eyes full of quiet pride. "Want me to come?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "I need to do this alone. But I'll need you when I get back." "Always," Lucas said, kissing him softly. The hospital was sterile and cold, the beep of machines a grim soundtrack. Richard Caldwell looked smaller in the hospital bed, his once imposing frame withered by illness. Claire stood nearby, her face drawn, and when she saw Ethan, she rushed to hug him, tears spilling over. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Richard's eyes met Ethan's, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a voice raspy from treatment, Richard said, "Ethan, I didn't think you'd come." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I almost didn't." The room felt too small, the air too thick. Ethan wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the sight of his father so frail, so human stole his anger. Instead, he sat, and they talked. Not about Thanksgiving, not yet, but about small things, Mia's school, Ethan's work, the weather. It was a start, fragile and uncertain, but a start. Ethan visited the hospital twice more over the next week, each trip a battle between resentment and a longing he couldn't name. Richard was weaker each time, his words slower, but he never brought up Thanksgiving. Ethan didn't either, afraid of what might spill out if the wound was reopened. Claire hovered, grateful but nervous, while Mia texted Ethan daily, her messages a mix of hope and fear. "He's asking about you more. I think he's trying." Back in Brooklyn, Lucas was Ethan's anchor. He'd cook terrible pancakes to make Ethan laugh, play soft guitar melodies when words weren't enough, and hold him when the weight of it all became too much. "You're stronger than you know," Lucas said one night, as they lay tangled in bed. "You're facing this, even when it hurts." Ethan buried his face in Lucas's neck. "What if I'm not ready to forgive him?" "Then you're not," Lucas said simply. "But you're still here. That's what matters." The ad campaign was now a finalist for the award, and the agency wanted Ethan to attend a final presentation in Chicago. It was a chance to cement his career, but the timing felt cruel. Richard's condition was worsening, and Ethan was torn between his past and his future. Lucas made the decision easier. "Go," he said, packing Ethan's suitcase. "Show the world what you're made of. I'll hold down the fort." Chicago was a blur of skyscrapers and nerves. Ethan presented his campaign to a packed room, his voice steady this time, fueled by Lucas's belief in him and the faces of every queer kid he'd ever known who needed to see themselves celebrated. The room erupted in applause, and later, over drinks, the agency's director pulled him aside. "Your work's changing the game, Ethan. We want you full-time. Lead creative on the next campaign." Ethan's heart raced. It was everything he dreamed of, but as he flew back to New York, his thoughts were on his father. When he landed, Mia was waiting at the airport, her face pale. "He's not going to make it much longer," she said, her voice breaking. "You need to come now." The hospital room was quieter this time, the machines louder than Richard's voice. He looked at Ethan, his eyes cloudy but focused. "I was wrong," he rasped, each word a struggle. "What I said, I was scared. Of losing you. Of not understanding." Ethan's chest tightened, tears burning his eyes. You called me filthy, Dad. In front of everyone. Richard's face crumpled. I know. And I'll carry that shame forever. I want you to be happy. You and Lucas. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was more than Ethan had expected. He nodded, unable to speak, and took his father's hand. It was frail, but it squeezed back, a silent bridge across years of pain. When Ethan returned to Brooklyn, Lucas was waiting, his arms open. Ethan collapsed into them, sobbing, the weight of his father's words, both the cruel ones and the new ones, pouring out. He's trying, Ethan whispered. I don't know if I can forgive him, but he's trying. Lucas held him tighter. That's all anyone can do. Days later, Richard passed. The funeral was small, the Connecticut air heavy with grief and unspoken words. Claire clung to Ethan, whispering apologies for her silence at Thanksgiving. Mia stood by his side, fierce and loyal. Ethan felt the loss, but also a strange peace, said what he needed to, and his father had listened. Back in New York, Ethan and Lucas walked through Central Park, the spring air warm with promise. What now? Lucas asked, his hand in Ethan's. We keep going, Ethan said, his voice steady. We build that family you talked about. And we make sure the world knows our love is worth celebrating. 5 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, Ethan's life had transformed. His campaign won the national award, and his new role as lead creative at the agency came with a corner office and a salary that meant he and Lucas could finally breathe. Lucas's band, The Drift, landed a record deal, their music echoing Ethan's designs in its raw, honest beauty. Their apartment, once a symbol of struggle, was now a home filled with laughter, music, and love. But the past wasn't done with them. One rainy April evening, as Ethan and Lucas cooked dinner, a knock came at the door. Ethan opened it to find his mother and Mia standing there, soaked and hesitant. Claire's eyes were red, her voice trembling. Ethan, we need to talk. Mia rushed forward, hugging him tightly. I told her we had to come, she whispered. We miss you. Ethan stepped back, letting them in, his heart pounding. Lucas, ever the gracious host, offered towels and tea, his presence a quiet reassurance. They sat in the living room, the space feeling smaller with the weight of their history. Claire spoke first, her hands twisting in her lap. I failed you, Ethan. I stayed silent when he hurt you. I was scared, and I was wrong. I see you now, how happy you are, how strong you are, and I'm so proud. Ethan's throat tightened. Why now, Mom? Why after all this time? Because losing your father made me realize how much I've already lost with you, she said, tears spilling over. I don't want to lose any more. Mia chimed in, her voice fierce. And I'm not letting this family stay broken. You're my brother, and I love you. Lucas too. Lucas squeezed Ethan's hand under the table, a silent reminder of their strength. Ethan looked at his mother and sister, seeing not just the pain of the past, but the possibility of something new. It's not going to be easy, he said, his voice steady. But I want to try. For us. Claire nodded, her face a mix of relief and guilt. We'll earn it, Ethan. I promise. That night, after they left, Ethan and Lucas stood on their fire escape, the city glittering below. You okay? Lucas asked, his voice soft. Ethan leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his love, the weight of his family's return, and the strength of the life they'd built. Yeah, he said, a smile breaking through. I think I am. The months that followed were a slow rebuilding. Claire and Mia visited often, learning to know Lucas, to see the love that defined Ethan's life. The agency rolled out Ethan's campaign nationwide, billboards and commercials celebrating queer love in all its forms. Each one felt like a victory, a middle finger to the word filthy and a love letter to everyone who'd ever felt less than. At a summer pride event, Ethan and Lucas stood hand in hand, watching as their story told through Ethan's designs and Lucas's music lit up the crowd. Mia was there, cheering louder than anyone, Claire beside her, tears in her eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was their family, not the one Ethan was born into, but the one he chose, built on love, resilience, and the courage to be seen. As the fireworks burst above, Ethan pulled Lucas close, whispering, "This is our happy ending." Lucas grinned, kissing him under the rainbow lights. "No, babe. This is just the beginning."